You're listening to the Confidence Alchemist radio show with your host, the Confidence Alchemist himself, Keith Blakemore Noble. To find out more, visit theconfidencealchemist.com. But not before you've listened to this episode of the Confidence Alchemist radio show.
Hello, welcome to another episode of the Confidence Alchemist radio show. Now, in this episode, we're going to look at things in a slightly different way. We have been looking at various tips we can use. We've been looking at some of the processes that go on deep within the brain so we can get a better understanding of how our mind works and why we are the way we are and how we can become the way we want to become. We're going to be exploring some of those things again in future episodes. I'm also starting to line up some very interesting guests who have got their own experiences they can share of life and lessons and journeys within various fields in the performing arts, which I think are going to be useful for all of us. There's a lot we can learn from each of those. That's some really exciting things to look forward to. What are we looking at today? Today I've called it myth busting, because there's within the fields of development, personal development, self-growth, whatever you want to call it, within these fields there's a lot of great information around, a lot of very useful stuff, a lot of very practical stuff that really works, experiences that people have had that they've used and really, really works, which is fantastic. There is also a fair amount of myth going around, and that's what I wanted to look at today. We're probably going to look at maybe 4 or 5 myths today. What these myths are, why they're so damaging, and also, excuse me, we're going to take a look at what can we actually learn from these myths, because even if something isn't completely right, even if it still has mistakes in it, there are still things we can learn from it, right? So this isn't about just denouncing different opinions as being wrong. It's not about that at all. It's about taking a look at some of the general myths, some of the perhaps perceived wisdom that floats around, really getting to grips with it, really analysing what's actually going on in there. Taking a look to see, is this right? Does it actually work that way? What are the pitfalls? What are the areas we have to be careful of? And what can we also learn from it? What are the useful bits we can take from it? Because anything in life has got some useful bits, some less than useful bits. And the sort of approach we're going to be adopting today is definitely an approach that's very useful to adopt in a wide range of areas in life. You'll see what I mean as we go through it. So that's what we're going to take a look at today. And remember, this isn't about bashing different opinions or any of that sort of thing. It's about taking what are now common myths, exploring kind of what's the kernel of truth inside them. How do they expand into being these myths? How can we strip away? What happens when we strip away all those layers of misunderstanding and misdirection and so on, and look at the core kernel within it? Because although I'm calling these myths, they're all myths. There's a nugget of I want to say truth, but I'm not going to say truth because truth is subjective, but there's a nugget of reality in there which can be very useful for us. That's what we're going to take a look at today. I'm just going to take a sip of water first, because I don't know what it's like where you are at the moment, but here it is baking hot. We're in the middle of a heat wave here in the UK. It's really rather warm, so it's very important to stay hydrated. In fact, it's very important to stay hydrated at all times, and also whenever you do any kind of change work on yourself. It's something I always advise clients. Make sure you drink plenty of water that day, more so than normal, because your brain is a very, very thirsty organ. When it's really churning away, doing a lot of work, a lot of processing what you've learned, the changes that you've made, you're going to need to keep it hydrated with plenty of water. That wasn't something I planned to put in here at all. It's just I happen to need a drink of water. Anyway, so let's start taking a look at these. Now, the very first myth. We all have the same 24 hours. We all have the same 24 hours. Therefore, we've got no excuses. We all have the same 24 hours, therefore we have no excuses. It's a myth. And it can be a very debilitating, very harmful myth, and a very judgmental myth. Very judgmental as well. So let's take a look. Let's take a look at it. Now, yes, we all have the same amount of time. So from a literal sense, yes, we all have 24 hours in a day. Well, actually we don't. Actually we have, 23 hours, 58 minutes, 4 seconds, something like that in a day. So we don't actually have 24 hours, but we refer to a day as 24 hours because it's as near as makes no difference, right? That's why we have leap years and all these leap days in leap years and so on, just to make up all this stuff. But to all intents and purposes, we have 24 hours. Now, yes, you have 24 hours in a day. I have 24 hours in a day. Sir Richard Branson has 24 hours in a day. Warren Buffett has 24 hours in a day. So, at its most literal, basic, and frankly useless level, yes, we do all have 24 hours in a day. However, that does not mean we can all achieve the same stuff within that 24 hours. Because, although we have 24 hours, we each have different levels of commitments, different access to resources, different ways in which we're able to use those 24 hours. Let me ask you this. Two people travelling to wherever it is they're travelling to, a meeting for example. One person has to use public transport, so they have to walk to the bus stop, wait, get the bus, assuming it arrives on time, get the bus, perhaps the bus to the train station, and then wait for the train, and then get the train to wherever they're going, and then from there they get the bus, and then finally walk to their destination. That's one person. The second person is picked up from their house by a chauffeur-driven car, chauffeur-driven all the way to the destination, step straight out from the car into the place of the meeting. Okay? They're both going to the same meeting. Perhaps they're both going from the same area. Now, why doesn't the second person give the first person a lift? Well, yes, that's a good question. Different question for another time. But the point is, they both travelled the same as the crow flies distance, going to the same meeting. They don't both take the same amount of time. Do you think that perhaps the person in the chauffeur-driven car might take less time to get there? For sure, they're going to take a lot less time to get there. Do you think they might be a bit more relaxed when they get there? Heck yes. Do you think they might have more of a chance to do some work whilst they're in that car, being chauffeur-driven? Of course, they're going to have much more chance and opportunity to catch up on work, to maybe make some calls, perhaps work on the presentation, read the briefing notes for the meeting they're about to go into. All these sorts of things. Where the person walking, in the bus, the train, the bus, walking, doesn't have nearly so much opportunity to get that stuff done. Plus, they take a lot. It's going to take them longer, generally, to make that journey. Now suppose those two people are actually going to somewhere overseas, for example. They're going abroad. One person has access to the company private jet. The other person has to rely upon scheduled airlines. Still reckon they're both going to take the same amount of time to get there? Nah, not a chance. We all have 24 hours. But we do not all get to make the same use of those 24 hours. The reality is, different people have different calls upon their time. Take another example. One person, a single parent, they've got to get their 3 kids ready for school every morning. They've got to get those kids to school. They've got to look after the house. They've got to collect those kids at the end of the school day. They've got to provide the meals for all of those kids. Other person isn't a single parent. If they have children, perhaps somebody else looks after preparing the meals for them. Somebody else cleans the house for them. They have a cleaner comes in and looks after the house. They have someone who prepares all the meals for them and their family. Are you really telling me they both take the same amount of time to look after their families? Of course not. So, to claim that we all have the same 24 hours, yes, physically we have the same amount of time, but what we can do in that time is different. And to tell somebody you have the same 24 hours as Warren Buffett or as Richard Branson or as any successful business person, you have the same 24 hours as they do, therefore you can get the same results, is complete poppycock. It is a lie. It is very unhelpful. It is harmful and judgmental toward the person that you are putting down with that ridiculous statement. The reason they can't get as much done is because there is far more stuff they have to do in that time than the other person. Or they don't have access to the resources that enable them to make such good use of time. We can't all have chauffeur-driven cars taking us to the company jet, for example. And this isn't jealousy or anything. Somebody's worked hard and got chauffeur-driven limousines, got a company jet. Good for them. Good on them. I wholeheartedly support them. I admire them. And I think they're being well rewarded for the excellent effort they're putting in. More power to them, quite frankly. Good on them. But they're not the ones who are coming out with this platitude, this nonsense that we all have the same 24 hours so we can all get the same results. We cannot. Different people have got different things which fill up that time. For some people, they do not have this amount of spare time to be able to achieve the things they want to achieve because of the reality of life. We can't all afford babysitters. We can't all afford nannies. We can't all afford cooks, cleaners, gardeners, chauffeurs. That is the reality of life. So next time somebody says, oh, we've all got the same 24 hours, know this, they're talking nonsense. Yes, at a literal level, we all have 24 hours in a day. But we do not all have the same pressures on that time. We do not all have the same available time in that day. Let me phrase it explain it in a slightly different way. Let's talk money. Suppose we say, right, we give everybody the same amount of money, regardless of what they do. Every household gets the same amount of money to live on. Doesn't mean they can all afford the same things. One household, 2 adults, 4 children, are they going to have the same disposable income as another household which is one single person? Of course they're not. And it's the same with time. Yes, we all have 24 hours in a day, but that doesn't mean we all have the same amount of usable time in that day. That's just the way it is. So next time somebody starts blaming you, because that's what it is. If somebody says to you, oh, you have the same 24 hours as everyone else, they are blaming you for not getting the results. They are playing the blame game. Know that. Realise that, and realise that their nonsense is irrelevant to you. And you can dismiss it because they are talking complete unhelpful nonsense. That's just the way it is, right? I know this is going to be unpopular with a lot of people. I can hear a lot of people tutting. I can sense the caps lock emails even as I speak. But this is the reality. We have 24 hours. Does not mean we can all get the same done because different people have different calls upon that time. And it's time we respected that and stopped judging people for what they can or can't achieve in the time they do or do not have. That's the first myth. Hopefully, well and truly busted. Now let's take a look at the second one. This second one is this is a biggie. This is a biggie in the world of development, and also it comes all manner of places. You can do anything if you can imagine it, you can be it. If you can conceive it, you can be it. You can be anything you dream of. If you dream it, you can achieve it. They all amount to the same thing. They're basically saying you can do anything. If you want to do something, you can do it. And the only reason, often it comes with a corollary along the lines of the only reason you don't achieve it is because you don't want it hard enough. Therefore, it's your fault. Blame, 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 blame. Again, it's another one of those highly judgmental, blame-ridden pieces of nonsense. This one does have a kernel of truth when we strip away all the judgmental layers that are built around it and all the fluff that's built around it. It does have a kernel of truth. And we'll come to that. We'll explore that kernel of truth in a few moments. First of all, however, let me just explain why we can't do anything just because If you can dream it, you can achieve it. Explain why that is nonsense. Well, the best way to explain why that's nonsense is with